Hello, my name is Francesca Biondi. I'm the manager of Space Contemporary Art Gallery here in Lisbon, promoting and supporting local and international artists. We're here this morning with Kathryn Graham. We have a new exhibition that we launched very recently, Stars and Stripes, and obviously the title is a reference to the US. And here we have a series of artworks, a new body work that Kathryn Graham created recently, inspired by her residency in the US. She's gonna tell you more.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Graham and I'm here in the gallery today to talk a bit about the work. I'll go through the idea behind the exhibition and the residency that everything kind of grew from. And the best place to really start is this kind of area. So the body of work, as Francesca touched on, was based on a residency I did where I spent a month, just over a month in America. I got accepted into the Tamarind Institute for lithography, which is based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was getting to spend a month there. I turned it into a bit of a road trip where I started in Las Vegas, Nevada, and worked across from Nevada, Utah, Arizona into New Mexico. So made a huge trip out of it, which was amazing, really fun, and sparked this entire body of work. I was really interested in the mythological concept of the open road and responding to these landscapes. I was really interested in investigating the idea of the American dream and its commercial construction, the notion of the land of the free, and then the commodification of that landscape. I was interested in spaces of circulation, communication, and consumption, discovering these iconic symbols along the way. This led me to the road sign, and the road sign as both a literal and symbolic marker of direction and meaning. So this was the very first piece I made when I was there, and it really took me back to drawing techniques. So I took a sketchbook with me on my travels and I spent a day, every day drawing, and then I wanted to make a series of prints from the daily drawings. And this was the very first one, and it was from a Super 8 hotel sign. And I don't know what it was that actually drew me to it. Was the kind of iconic imagery, that 8 and that symbol that struck a chord. I didn't know what the Super 8 hotel really was at the time. It was until some American peers on the course let me know that it was a kind of dodgy motel that you wouldn't really want to be staying in. But I really idolised it and seen it in a different light, which is kind of a wide metaphor for the entire concept of the exhibition. So the idea behind the road sign is that it's both a literal and symbolic marker of shared meaning. Through the work, I began to investigate cultural imagery and Americana, and that ability to evoke a sense of deep nostalgia for places never visited, symbols rooted in American identity, and how they become globally recognisable. Reflecting on how unfamiliar spaces can really feel familiar through the embedding of a shared cultural memory and imagination. These symbols, I felt so nostalgic because Americana was something that I had perhaps grown up with through TV, film, comic books, and pop culture. In that, the work took on an influence of Andy Warhol and Ed Ruscha.
Because I was reading about the exhibition, the information you gave us, and yes, we were mentioning that you started with this romantic idea of the US as a place, as the place of the open road where you have this sense of freedom and that you experience traveling everywhere in the country and then discover different places. And then, yeah, you picked a few images here in the artworks, and they're references to these places that you visit. But can you tell us more about these romantic idea of the US and how it's conveyed through symbols, images that we absorb every day, even if we have never been in the US, or people who have been in the US, and then have these clear references, familiar and less familiar images that we associate with the country, and then they help us to construct this image of the country, and that can be real or can be imagined, just not only image, but narratives that we create about places. So can we go back to, yes, these ideas behind your project?
Yes, so the idea of Americana and the symbols that define Americana, I always think of Warhol's pop art screen prints, and that's always been a kind of reference point for me, as well as Russia's petrol station photographs and later screen prints. There's very iconic symbols and images that help you visualize what America is as a non-American. I think as a non-American you definitely have a different view of America. These symbols that are rooted in American identity become globally recognisable, and it reflects on how unfamiliar spaces can feel familiar through this embedding of a shared cultural memory and imagination. The works emerge from a sense of nostalgia that flickers against the backdrop of Americana, whilst blurring the line between myth and memory, the familiar and the foreign, and building off my own experience, my own open road, my own drive. I examine how these constructed landscapes and mythic ideals such as Route 66 continue to shape personal and collective narratives by dissecting and recontextualising these visual symbols. I was really interested in inviting viewers to consider how identity and belonging are formed through the spaces we navigate, both real and imagined. That's heavily based on travel, but it's also based on just visiting a new space, whether that be in your own country or a new country, or whether it just be down the road. The perspective of home and trying to find comfort away from home in what we find familiar. So that sense of nostalgia that comes through in work is from that, and that idea of holding on to these symbols that we recognise and feel nostalgic to us. And that idea of nostalgia was really important because I'm nostalgic for something that I've never actually grown up with other than what I've seen on the screen.
Yes, can we look at that particular artwork? So you say you were traveling and then you were looking at the landscape and places around you, and then you picked particular images.
This is based on Vegas, and to me Vegas was a simulation. It was a place that didn't quite feel real. There was a real sense of plasticity there, where everything was oversized, over-sexualized, over-indulgent. It was all big, it was money, it was shiny, it was glitzy, it was gloss. And I think that's actually fed into most of the works, that idea of oversize, of consumption and consumerism and everything that you get when you visit the US. But Vegas was the pinnacle of that, and these works are based off my experience in a casino. I had to try casino art, so I lost all my money betting. But basically the casinos are designed in a way where it's a maze and you can't find your way out. They're designed so that you're stuck inside, and I very much experienced that of not being able to find my way out and being constantly surrounded by noise, by people, by the sound of the machines, by the machines themselves are so large and imposing that everything is designed to suck you in, but that sense of sucking in
sounds like so dizzy, like the noise, the sounds, and the images. Just everything is so hyperbolic.
And you get free drinks. Drinks are just brought to you, so you can sit. It's all designed that you sit and spend money all night.
And
so
then
that sense of lost time is actually quite important in these works, the time of just repetition that the hours just pass.
And then you have the sense of repetition here as well, just the same image repeated again, again. There's no way out, just stuck there and at the bar or at the machines, and then just you keep going. But we were saying that some images, some artworks have specific references to places, but some symbols really appear everywhere, and they're not necessarily linked to a particular location. What about this work here? It says it's guns, yes. With guns, we always associate guns with the US, so very appropriate symbol, I would say, that you picked to convey the image of the American culture.
Yeah,
and the landscape.
Of guns, we're always associated in America with guns and the gun laws out there. So I don't remember where I took this image from, and I think that's actually quite something to be said in that itself, and that it could be anywhere in America, that it's so prevalent out there. So that idea of the mythic quality of the symbols, like the guns and like even the electricity poles, is that these symbols emerge and how they distill vast, complex landscapes, both physical and emotional, into these quite digestible, evocative images.
It doesn't look so threatening, doesn't it? The guns don't look so threatening. They're in pink, yeah. It's a kind of idealized.
Why I might transform this into print, why have I done it the way I have? But the idea of transforming and reimagining itself was really important. The kind of constructed and the organic, the universal and then the personal. So there's so many layers within the work, and the work has made itself in layers that the meaning was just additioned. And I work very much like a painter, and I think of my layers as paintings and building up my canvas. Only my canvas is paper, so I don't work in additions. Everything is a one-over-one and only exists that way. Print and sculpture, I really looked at how the photographs I had taken could be reimagined and reconfigured through a personal retelling and the collective memories entwined. The exhibition reflected on the allure of the American dream and the symbolism of the flag, for example, the romance of the open road, and the spaces between longing and belonging. The work explores how cultural symbols like the road sign transcend their origins and can become vessels for imagined ideals and personal projections. I'm really interested in Baudrillard's writing, and he talks about the American desert as a place of emptiness, but not in a negative sense, but as a stage for the pure, raw simulation of American culture. So I was really interested in that idea of being able to project your own ideals into this space. I mean, Las Vegas itself is built in the middle of a desert, there's nothing else surrounding it. The idea that you can create something from nothing was really interesting. And on that as well, that Baudrillard sees the desert emptiness as liberating, and it offers existential clarity, where one can confront absence of tradition and embrace pure, unmediated experience of the present. So going back to the symbols, I wanted to make these in a way that you had the space to project, to recreate that desert, and be able to project your own ideas onto these images. So I took images I'd taken and photoshopped them, and then worked with AI to create the backgrounds. So these backgrounds are actually AI generated, and they're not real. They're not real images that exist in the world, but they are real spaces that exist in the world. So that idea of fake, fact, and fiction was important in creating these, and the idea of being able to project. Going back to Andy Warhol and Ed Ruscha, I began using glitter in the work. I was thinking of the landscape and the kitschness and thought I'd like to lean into that more. In this there is a layering of traditional and a layering of the new processes over the old. Inspired by Rebecca Solnit's A Field Guide to Getting Lost, I reflect on how being in unfamiliar territory prompts self-discovery. Her quote states, "Getting lost is not a matter of geography so much as identity." This quote underpins my investigation into how identity is shaped by place and by the stories we create about those places. My time spent driving through the deserts of Nevada, Arizona and Utah, which ultimately led me to Route 66, the road that no longer physically exists but remains iconic in global imagination. This mythic highway was once a symbol of freedom and possibility, now only serves as a vessel of cultural memory, bridging the personal and collective experience of the American dream. I feel like this show is my projection of my experience, ultimately romantic, but derived from a place which has its own struggles, and I believe as time has went on, the work has become more bitter, more fragmented, more distorted through what is happening in the US right now. I have an image of, I've so many images of the Grand Canyon, but it was this AI generated one that was important to use for the meaning behind the work, and that way that we're playing with what's real, what's not real, and the idea of projecting ourselves, our identities and our ideas on this landscape.
That's so interesting that you use AI. So, because there's this big debate about artwork generated by AI. To what extent is the artist still the artist, and then to what extent is actually the AI being the artist? So, how do you create the background? Did you give specific instructions? How did it work? I'm just curious to find out more about.
Yeah, so this image itself was a car in New Mexico, and I cropped out the car and I asked AI to make me a background, and I simply typed in "make it America."
Oh, right.
And I wanted it to be AI's idea of America, so that there's the conversation then between myself, my memory, collective memory, and then AI on top of that and other technologies.
It's so interesting. So even AI has its own ideal image of the US. It's quite, those bright colors, cheerful colors, even the contrast with the blue and the pink, and then the orange is a very joyous one, I would say.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, AI, the backgrounds I made myself.
Yes.
So I their screen printed, and then it's this all around the trees and the landscape itself that AI has generated.
All right.
So it's the landscape.
Yes, the vast landscape that we associate with the US, don't we? Just the vast landscapes, you can travel everywhere, just get in your car, get on the road and drive.
There's a navigating of the boundary between authentic and artificial, which comes through in each layer: glitter, carborundum, acrylic. There's photographic and drawn techniques in every single one of the works. They may look photographic, but I have made sure that I have a hand touch in each of them, whether that be painted, drawn or stamped. There's an exploring of freedom in disconnection and finding oneself in new and unfamiliar places. I have endless inspiration from the trip, endless photographs to dissect and dissolve. I find time a friend when making work, because it's only through time that I'm able to look back with a clear vision, clear eyes, and to be able to comment on where I've been, why, how, and how I have changed because of this. Time consumption. So road signs situated in this transient way, and as markers, is what I'm really trying to build on, and the hyper-real nature of them, as well as the exaggerated cultural meaning, parallels this hyper-reality.
And then some images, yes, you can see images of landscapes place outside, but then these three works here are different from the others. You have images over here of houses and a horse. So we're moving inside interiors here, or the domestic spaces. Would you like to tell us more about these works? How they're different from the others as you're moving in interiors, and you're moving closer to houses?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it at the start briefly, where finding a sense of home in a place is important when you find familiar and non-familiar. The idea of this was reconstructing fragmented memory of spaces that aren't actually real. So home is always something that we consider when we travel, and always something that we relate to. And how we relate to people is what we have in common. So I was trying to find what I had in common in this in these spaces that felt actually very alien at times. I'm not used to the desert. I'm not used to the culture in a sense. So these were important. These spaces themselves are actually dolls' houses. So there is that tension between the authentic and the artificial in what's real and what's not real, which comes throughout the show, in questioning what's real and what's not real. There is hand-drawn elements in all of these works, where my hand touch is in a work and you can't always tell, and that's also important in that you don't know if it's completely digital or it's AI or it's my self-drawing or my self-painting, and that's in every single work.
Is there anything else you would like to add to your comments about the show?
I guess to round the show up, I have a quote that says, "Movement, discovery, and the intersection of the mundane and extraordinary, tied to road signs and the American West." And I actually asked AI to round the show up from my thoughts, and that's what AI said it was. So I thought it was important in that how I've used it in certain works there, and then how it feels about my language, my words on the show.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, Kathryn, for these insights into your new body of work, the exhibition. Thank you very much, Kathryn, for these insights into your new body of work. Stars and Stripes runs until the 7th of March here at our space. You're very welcome to visit this show. Thank you. Bye.